Hello again, and welcome back, all my listeners and hearers, and well, listening and hearing is the same thing, but admirers and they who are interested in the things I've been saying. Welcome. Working on an intro kind of thing, so bear with me. Like I said, still working on some technical things, obviously, and that's just kind of the way it is. But this is Finding the Balance with me, Chase Orozco. Just a little thing I've started here. Just decided, given the extra time that I've had, just sort of actually try to put something together a little more meaningfully. That's what I've tried to do here. And so what I want to do for this episode, just kind of diving right in. I want to discuss some of the things I've observed in the last few days. Actually, you know what I should have done before I started? I should have pulled some things up. Okay, let me see here. It should be able to, let's see here. Man. I'm looking for, I probably won't be able to find this because Facebook's newsfeed thing is just so wacky now. I've never been able to get used to it. It used to be so much more simple where it was just like it was just chronological order stuff, unless you wanted it to be different. I mean, I guess you can still kind of do that, but it still doesn't do that for me. It still always makes the most popular ones and just, I don't know, it has this sort of just the algorithms are weird now. I just don't understand it. So I'll have to summarize this post that I was observing on a friend's Facebook, and then just to kind of make some points here. But the other thing I wanted to look at and to discuss and just sort of the things that are going on is to do with just, again, I guess maybe in a sense to continue some of the things I've been saying, which is the level of panic that is going on. I really think that you're seeing right now, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic in storytelling. So one of the cool ways to do character development in a story is to take a character and put them in a desperate situation, and all the talk that they may have been doing throughout the book or the TV show or whatever movie, all the talk they've been doing beforehand, all this stuff that you see them talking about, well, all that gets put to the test when you put them in a situation that where the rubber meets the road kind of stuff, and that's when you learn who a character really is. When that happens, all the rhetoric, all the talk, that's when you learn that all that stuff is put to the test. Do you really believe all that stuff that you were talking about? And I think right now we are really learning who, in all the talk about principles and all this stuff, the importance of knowing your history and blah, 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 you're starting to see that sort of come home to roost in so many people that I'm honestly shocked, who are taking the positions, who are comfortable with any idea of the government just overreaching its power and saying, you know what, you're closed, you're closed, you're closed, and you're closed. I mean, if you don't stay closed and if you don't stay home, you're being fined, and we're coming for you. I mean, that's, I would just think that at least somebody who's thinking rationally would be uncomfortable with that at the very least. Now you may say, well, the circumstances seem to call for it. Okay, I think that's honestly, that sounds reasonable. But what I would like to hear you say is that this is something we need to talk about. But I don't hear anybody wanting to talk about any of this. I hear most people on the other side, the side that's panicking. I just hear them saying, just shut up and fall in. And if you don't, you want grandma to die and you want everybody to die. You just don't care about people. All you care about is your money. That's basically all I'm getting on the other side. And that's the point I want to make, because I saw I started thinking yesterday. I'm like, is it just uniquely me? Am I being the jerk, who's being insensitive to the severity of the situation by constantly talking about the economic fallout and why we cannot close things down completely? And the backlash I get all is just, if I can paraphrase it, it's just basically that I am not being responsible and I'm not loving my neighbor. So I started thinking, is that true? I mean, could that really be true? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe I really am being unloving. But I started to see in the past few hours since then, maybe 24 hours, you could say, evidence that that might not actually be the case. Because I'm seeing friends of mine engage with other friends of mine on this subject, and they're getting the same things from. So the friends of mine who are concerned about what we're doing are receiving the same kind of thing that makes them go, I mean, hey, what did I do? I haven't attacked you. I haven't said anything bad about you, and you're responding to me this way. Why are you doing this? I'm just pointing out my concerns. That's what I've been trying to do, and that's what I've been getting. That's the kind of stuff I've been getting, is that is a hostile reaction to me. And I think that that's something that should, for people on the panic side, should concern you. And I'm talking about especially for you guys, because you guys, I'm talking to conservatives, my friends and stuff, fellow Christians, who I absolutely respect theologically, and conservatively, who I'm kind of floored. I didn't expect this. I thought we were going to really, as a collective whole, know what we should do, what we ought to do. I think Christians should, by default, be in some sense students of history. I mean, there's church history and stuff like that. I think you should be somewhat familiar with that, and at least in a cursory manner, concerned with that. And I think part of this is a result of an ignorance of history. But that's something I may talk about. I've been talking a lot about that lately. But maybe I've talked enough about that. Made some fine points. You can look at my other programs the last couple of days to see that. But I'm kind of shocked and concerned at this reaction. So a friend of mine, and when I say friend, I'm talking about Facebook friend. I've never actually really interacted with these people very much, but on Facebook, Keith Tankersley, I think that's his last name, responded to a post by someone named Elizabeth Estrada, responding to a post of hers about, she's absolutely livid about people who won't stay home. I mean, she's just like firing off all the barrels about this. And again, both Christians, probably better Christians than I am. I mean, I mean that. I mean, like honestly, like, dude, these guys, these two do so much more. I mean, Elizabeth, I believe she works at the hospital, and she's sharing the gospel while she's there and stuff. And Keith, he's a husband, a father. I mean, it's better than anything I've accomplished in his life. So, I mean, I have such respect for them, and their maturity. But Elizabeth is like not. She's like some of my other friends, just not having any of it. And Keith is concerned about our response to this as well, as far as I can tell. And she just kind of, again, the assumption that's being made is that he's I don't want to say attacking, but he's there's a sense of like a projection of hostility. And I either there's only two things that, as a result of that, either it really is that Keith really was being hostile, and I don't think that's possible, since Keith has been shown himself several times, all the time, not to be that kind of a person. So that's kind of out the window. Or two, Elizabeth, in all due respect, is projecting onto Keith something that's not really there. Now, why would she do that? Well, I think the obvious reason is panic. That's what it's doing to people. It's causing us to just freak out and lose our minds, sort of. Now, I think panic can disguise itself pretty well too, because I have friends, again, who sound, they are when they argue with me, they're not jumping on like super duper emotional train, all caps kind of at you, kind of thing like that. And how dare you're murdering people? Don't do that, but in a very reasonable tone, you could say, demonstrates, in my eyes, not thinking very clearly about any of this. And again, the reason why I really believe that is because my concerns and the concerns of people on my side are almost never addressed. No one ever wants to talk about any of that. All they care about is like, we can't let people die. So we've got to do whatever it takes not to let people die. And if you don't see the danger in that kind of thinking, I just want to, in gentleness, tell you, you don't really know your history very well. All of what did C.S. Lewis say? Something about the. I want to look it up now. C.S. Lewis, tyranny. It's this one right here. Let me stand by for a moment. C.S. Lewis said, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." That's extremely dangerous. He kind of talks a little bit about this in the Screw Tape Letters, about sort of convincing the patient to use religious means for whatever end he's trying to get, to justify whatever he's doing. It's for the good of everybody. And that's if that's your primary essential ethic, that sounds good on the outside, but it really isn't. You've got to think more deeply on this. And this is going to transition into why I call this program Finding the Balance. But first, just want to, a little bit more on this issue. Again, just to emphasize that all tyranny rises out of the conviction of one person or one group of people for what is the greater good. And the question then is asked, well, who defines what the greater good is? And when you define what the greater good is, you still have to solve the problem of by what means can we go about doing the greater good. And right now, the way we're reacting, the means don't matter. It's just the greater good. And that's tyranny, because it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you're doing what's best for everybody. And I just want to tell you, that's extremely dangerous thinking. And I realize, I understand that there's a sense of desperation here. And this is another one of the things I want to go to here. The best way to find this is to go to this post here. Something I found that I'm honestly reluctant to even share on my own wall, because I'm reluctant to share a lot of anything on my wall about the coronavirus, because even if I share what I want, what I have here, honestly, I'm afraid that people are going to go, you just you just want people to die then. I mean, I honestly don't know what to do anymore. I don't know what to do. I've tried, and I have dear friends who are saying these kinds of things to me. That I don't want to compromise and ruin our friendship over that. And maybe that makes me a coward for not confronting what I think, with my convictions and just letting them say things like that to me. I don't know. I'm honestly a loss. Should I just, I've been accused of idolatry. So I've been accused of sin. I've been accused of sinfulness by dear friends, for wanting to ask questions about this. I've been falsely accused of believing this is a hoax. I've never said it was a hoax. And all this stuff, should I allow that to just go for the sake of friendship, or should I just fire back? I want to fire back, but I have to seriously ask myself if that's genuine desire to correct false witness against me, or if that's my flesh. Just that's the demon residing over me, who's like screw tape or like wormwood over his patient. The demon residing over me, in a sense, telling me, do it, Chase. Just give him a piece of your mind. He doesn't care about you. Just do it. And I had to seriously consider that when I wanted to respond to a certain friend of mine who basically said that to me, accused me of sin. And well, maybe he didn't accuse me, but he said that I'm defending what is, he called, an idolatry of individual sovereignty, which is absurd given my theology. But so I took that as accusing me of sin, and then as an extension, if people die, that's somehow on me. So I didn't respond to that. I mean, I responded, but I said I couldn't respond immediately because I was offended. I was genuinely offended by that he would ever think that about me. Apparently he doesn't know me as much as he thought he did, because I've been questioning media narratives for years. There's nothing new about what I'm doing. I've never pandered stupid conspiracy theories. I've never pandered the idea of 9/11 was an entirely inside job thing. I mean, I do think that there are some strange elements of it, yeah, but I've tried to maintain a reasonable approach in saying, so some of my principles would be, without conclusive evidence, at this point we can just speculate, and without conclusive and substantial, sort of external things that would lead one to believe that someone could benefit from this thing, even though you can't make a direct connection. But you can make some sort of a connection. In other words, so let's say there's a certain group over here, who may want something to happen over here, and then something happens over here that happens to just be something that these guys would be interested in having happen, but you can't directly connect that to them. But then if you could point out some certain strange and inconsistencies and stuff in what happened, I think you could make a substantial, not a conclusive. There's a difference between substantial and conclusive. Conclusive would mean that it's settled. It's pretty much just settled. Substantial means that it carries some significant weight. It should make you stop and ponder. So I think if you can do that, you can make a substantial case for a particular theory. But that's not the same thing as saying this is what happened, And I do my best to differentiate between them, those kinds of things. The difference between a substantial case and a conclusive. Right now, I'm on the basis of a substantial case that things are strange right now. So I don't pander these silly conspiracy theories, aliens sucking up cows and people and probing them and whatever, all the weird stuff. And the one going on right now with the 5G network thing. Now that, again, the 5G network thing, let me just say, is interesting. Okay, there have been some discussions much prior to this about 5G, the 5G network and its strangeness, but I can't confirm a lot of it, so I don't really have a way of verifying it myself. So I look at that as sort of a substantial, a possible scenario, but I'm not gonna go there. I'm trying to stick to what's very clear and obvious, and I have my theories about what I think is going on. Excuse me. I think very simply, it's an attempt to wreck this economy for the upcoming election. But I think the left succeeded in more ways than they intended. I think that's a possible case. It might look at this and go, dude, if we can really push this thing to keep going, I mean, we don't even have to have an election later on. We can just ruin the entire country and then start from scratch, because that's the basic premise, right? That's what all progressivism, that's what all of wokeness is is designed to do, is to deconstruct the system and build something new out of it. That's what its entire purpose is. Don't you think that that's something interesting? I think that is. Does that mean that COVID-19 isn't a real thing? No. Again, haven't you ever heard of never let a good crisis go to waste? Could it be possible that this thing, which is a real thing, is being used, and that it's being manipulated by the media? When I say manipulated, see, I guess one of the problems we're having today is like we're using words in ways other than their classical meanings. So today we typically look at manipulated in our modern, I think honestly, frankly, stupidizing culture and thought frames. I think it's just we're getting dumber and dumber. So in our modern context, manipulating is synonymous with saying, presto, boom. There's an illusion of something here, which isn't really there. But manipulating is not the same thing as an illusion. An illusion is something that's not there, which looks like it's there. I've never said this whole thing's an illusion. The original term of a manipulation presupposes the thing is there and it's being manipulated. When you look at a rock underwater, the nature of the water manipulates the rock, makes it look zigzaggy and weird and stuff like that. But the rock's still there. It's being manipulated to look like a snake or something like that. That's what I'm talking about. So when I say manipulated, I'm presupposing the thing's there. I'm using it in its classical definition. But that it's being manipulated. It's being warped in a way to create a narrative that makes it seem bigger than what it actually is. And I remember when I was a kid, when 9/11 happened, that was back when I really didn't know anything about New York City or anything like that. I mean, I was a kid just sitting here in San Antonio, suburban San Antonio. It was just bliss. And then, when I heard about 9/11, I didn't see any kind of. By the time my parents picked us up and brought us home, I was in 6th grade at the time, and we were looking at the news. I think by then that was somewhere around 9 o'clock. So I think the towers came down by then. If I'm not mistaken. It was about an hour later. It was about 9 o'clock when they fell. So we got home. This is how much I remember the day. We got home around right after they fell, I think. And I'm just being told that the United States is under attack, that we've been bombed. And so I had my mind, based on that information. Now, obviously I was a kid, so I understand it's not totally analogous to where we're at right now. But what I got from that was there are some kinds of bombers flying over the United States right now, bombing cities. That's what I thought was happening. And it was only like later on in the day, way later in the day, when I learned that it was just planes that went straight into the buildings. That was it. I was like, oh, okay. Well, then I started thinking, what if there's more planes out there? And that's what everybody was thinking. What if there's more planes out there? That's the panic. See, what if there's more? And no, obviously our approach to that was probably pretty reasonable. You ground all the planes, right? And that makes perfect sense. But that panic factor, it begins to just sort of spread, and makes you see things that aren't really there. And that's the thing I'm trying to, warn us about. And so it's very easy when you're given bits and bits of information, but you're not given the whole context of what it is. So what I've done here is I found this website. It tracks all the coronavirus cases in the United States, and this includes our territories as well, like Puerto Rico. So apparently we have, if you count them as states, we have 56 states. Okay. It tracks it all the way from March 4th. And in March 4th, we were, according to this map, by March 4th, we were testing only 14 states. It doesn't say which ones we were testing, but we were testing only 14 states. And we had a total. See, this is the thing here. This is what I love about this. I I talked about this in my very first broadcast, but or program. What I love about this one, and I don't like about most of the ones you see, even on the CDC website, because I went on the CDC website and I was looking for this information. I couldn't find it anywhere. This doesn't just tell you the number of confirmed cases. It tells you, and how many people have died. It tells you how many were tested and how many were tested negative. Now, that's really important. Why is that important? Well, again, if all you're given is the number of confirmed cases without the context of out of how many tested, out of how much we've increased in testing since then, how many cases were negative and stuff like that, and how much of the negative cases increased and stuff. When you're not given that context, it's very easy to create a panic soup. But when you're given all that context, that changes things. So out of on the first day we began testing, according to this, March 4th, in a total of 14 states, we had a total of 866 cases. 866 tests total. The positive was 118. The negative 748. So I got my trusty calculator here because I'm terrible at math. If you were to take the not right now, 748 minus 118. So out of 866 in total testing, 630 came back negative for the virus. That's quite a number. By March 5th, we had a total of 1,129 tests. And out of that, 953 tested negative for the virus. Now when it says 1,129, that's not 1,129 in that day. It's adding from what came below, and it's just adding on top of that. So by March 5th, we had a total of 1,129 total tests, a total of 953 negatives, and a total of 176. So the number went up. 176 minus 118. The number went up 42 of confirmed cases. How many tests, how many of the number came back negative? 748. No, I'm sorry. I gotta start. 953 minus 748. 205 of negative cases increased out of the other one, which was like, I think it was like 45. Positive. And this thing goes up and up and up and up, and then if you put it all together and you're you do the math, the ratio and stuff of number infected, the actual number of infected, the more we increase our testing, begins to drop. Right now, I believe if I recall correctly, right, somewhere around in the March 23rd ish time. Let me see here. Wonder if we can just take a number here. 344. Well, let's start a little bit lower first. Let's go back to March 20th. On March 20th, we had 100. This is in the United States. 135,180 tests in total. Divided by 17,033. Wait, I think I did that wrong. I have to work on that one a little bit. Wait, this is a pretty interesting calculator. There's a lot of stuff in here that's very interesting. But if you go to like March 20th, we had so let's kind of stick with the same thing that we were just doing. We had a total of 100,870 tests done. Out of that, we had, so by this time we have 160 deaths. You have 100,870 270 total testing. Out of that, you have 11,719 tested positive, 89,151 tested negative, 160 deaths. So now that was on the 19th of March. Now, let's see, the 20th of March. So 20th of March, we have 135,180 total tests. So we're going to do some math here again. 135,180 minus 100,870. Now, by this time, we're testing all the states. By March 19th, we got all the states in our testing. So the number of testing has increased by this point from the 19th of March to the 20th. In a matter of a day, according to this, we had increased our testing. We had added 34,310 tests to that. Of that, so we go to our negatives here. Make sure I'm on the negatives. We go to our negatives here. Of that, 89,151 were tested negative, and then minus 66,225. So in that time, with the increased testing, 22,926 were tested negative in total. Excuse me. So that they were tested negative. Now, 11,000. These are the positives. 11,719 minus 7,730. 3,000. So the amount of positives increased to 3,989. So again, if we can just kind of go back here a little bit, 89, 151 minus 66. 66, yeah, 225. So the increase of negatives as a result of the increase in testing, rapid increase in testing, the increase in negatives is up to 22,900, almost 23,000. The amount of those who tested positive, 3,000. It increased up to 3,000. It's not even in the anywhere near. That's just nowhere close to a double digit in the 1,000 range. And it only increases. The more we're doing the testing, the more these numbers begin to just separate. And when you go to the 25th of March, let's go to the 23rd of March. And the 23rd of March, we have a total of 279,473 tests. Almost 280,000 tests in total in the United States. So by March 23rd, 280,400, almost 280,000, 280,000 tests, almost that much. Of that, who came back negative, 237,321, 42,000 positive. And the death rate by that point, 471. So if you start putting these numbers in the context, when you start putting them in their context, and it's not to say that that these deaths aren't tragic, that they're meaningless. Who cares about these people? It's not saying that at all. The point being made here is, while this is a difficult situation, it's nothing to freak out over and melt the system down as a result. There's no point in doing that. You don't have sufficient data and evidence to make such a claim. And you know, I've been kind of asking around too, you know, and I don't say these things because I'm trying to get people to stop worrying about this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be concerned, but this is what finding the balance is all about. There should be a twofold concern going on here. You should be concerned with what we're doing as a response to all of this. That should also be equally concerning to you. You cannot afford to just roll over on one end and just do everything on one side of imbalance. You've got to find a certain balance. Just like we can't afford to go on the complete other end and just like pretend like nothing's going on. I've never advocated for that either. I've never said anything like that. I've always said, be careful, be cautious, take this seriously. But I started at, right now the projection numbers, as the last I checked, was like they were anticipating like something like 100,000 deaths here in the United States before this is all over. That's what the projection was. And I know that people are saying, that the checks we have coming in the mail are just for, about a month, 2 months worth maybe. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but I didn't know that that's like how long we were going to be doing this. I thought we were going to be going for like a month, obviously. That's what Trump said. That's what I've heard last anyway. But how do you reconcile that? So you're going to stop giving us checks by the end of April, but you're projecting a total of 100,000, maybe some people have said 200,000 deaths. I'm going with the minimum, 100,000. You're projecting that, which if you actually look at the death rate right now, it's going to take a while before we get there. I'm talking like maybe 2 years before we get to that point at the rate we're going. You can't be just giving me a check for a month and $1,200 and expect me to get by on that. I mean, what in the world is it? I mean, so these are questions, guys, to be asking, and going, and then if you're honestly asking the questions, you have to be going, that is a good point, because they were saying this and now they're saying this, and these don't seem to add up. And that's the thing I've been trying to get people to recognize. I've just been trying to get people to ask some serious questions about this. We're not doing that. I mean, we are falling hook, line, and sinker when the government, and I can tell you guys, history has shown this over and over and over and over and over again. When people are panicked, they, in the desperation, are going to anybody who's going to save them. And right now, the government is it. And they're just listening to whatever they're saying. They're not thinking critically about what they're saying. They're not saying, wait a minute, you said this, but what about this? And everybody who's saying things like that, they go, hey, dude, what are you doing? I mean, we're about to lose our country, man. Stop with this. We just got to do this. We just have to go. I mean, gosh, our livelihoods are on the line. People are going to die. That's what it is. Again, look at Thomas Massey. I talked about him in my first program episode. He's a guy who's trying to get people, the Congress, to follow constitutional standards, principles, which are vital, especially, like I've been saying, especially right now. Those are vital. And even the president is just lambasting him and just, called him a grandstander. And they want to throw him out now. They're gonna primary against him now. And so Thomas Massey, he absolutely needs our help. He's the one guy sitting up there right now trying to let cooler heads prevail, that we don't, in our desperate attempt to come up with a solution, blow the whole thing up. That's what he's trying to do. And he's getting ridiculed and just absolutely destroyed over it by both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. That should be something that we should be thinking about. I don't know why I turned this off. I want to go back to my notes. Whoop. There we go. So again, those are things to consider. I'm gonna post this to. I'm gonna post a link to this when I publish this. But I want to spend the rest of our time here talking about finding the balance. What finding the balance means. And when I think about this subject of finding the balance, I'm always brought to that point in Jesus's ministry when he's in Matthew, when he's on the narrow road. The way is straight and narrow to that leads to life, and the way to death is broad is the way to destruction, kind of thing like that. I think there's many applications to be made of that. And if you go to my I'm going to post an article that I wrote about it, why I call this finding a balance. But over the years, as I've been sort of pondering on issues and stuff, I've begun to see that there's almost in every situation, there's the objective reality of whatever it is, and then there's two different ways to get to it, and there's typically two ways to get to it, and those two ways are imbalanced in some way, shape, or fashion. So in other words, they have the same objective, but they go at it in imbalanced ways. At least two. Sometimes there's different ways, but at least two totally imbalanced ways. And that the way to actually do it is to be aware and try to walk that fine balance that allows you to walk that straight and narrow path. Now, was Jesus in that part in Matthew, was he talking about exactly what I'm talking about? I don't think so, but I'm talking about the application that can be made. So there's several examples and I give several examples in the article that I wrote. But you can look at this entire situation as one of the examples with the COVID-19 thing, the coronavirus. You have right now it seems like two sides. Really, honestly, yeah, you do have two sides. Just one's not being reasonable, and the other one is actually trying to be reasonable here. Because the other half of the coin that's just absolutely is just totally don't do anything and who cares, I'm going on my spring break thing like that, is almost non-existent. Those are like the Anabaptists of the Reformation. They're the weird ones. They're just kind of out there a little bit. But anyways, but we're gonna talk about that extreme too. So there's that extreme, the extreme of do absolutely nothing and just eat, drink, and be merry, and then there's the other side, which is just like shut the system down completely. These are two extremes that both have a single goal. Well, they don't really have a single goal in mind in this case, but they both address the same issue, though. That's the thing. That's the thing. What I mean about the objective reality, it's the same issue, two different approaches to resolution, you could say, on that one issue. Now, both of those views, when you think them through, will do more harm, because the one side is concerned with the immediate health and resolution, you could say. The other side really doesn't care. But so how do you approach it? By caring, but also not being completely zeroed in on the immediate, where you're concerned with the lasting effects. There's that fine balance you have to walk, and that's what I've been trying to do too. I've been trying to say that we take this thing seriously. It's a good idea to get people tested nationwide, and then people who test positive to isolate them, just put them in a quarantine and let the rest of society continue to go. I think that's a biblical approach. That's the way they did it in the Bible. They did in the Levitical laws. They had the lepers stay outside the camp until they were cured. 7 days, I believe. And then they could be welcomed back into camp, but the camp always had to keep going. So you don't shut down a society for the sake of a few sick individuals, because those few individuals may eventually recover, but now the society crumbles completely, and then now everybody is, you could say, economically sick, and that's going to lead to greater catastrophes. So that's why you cannot go the other way. You cannot go the way that the panicking people are going. You can't afford to do that. It will not be sustainable. It will cause far greater damage than COVID-19 will. And I think, unlike COVID-19, which we don't have a whole lot of history of, I think, and therefore your predictions of future outcomes is almost fictional, because you can't really honestly predict. You don't. If you can't on the one hand say this is a totally new thing, we know almost nothing about it, and on the other hand say our projections are clearly tell us that this is going to, because of this COVID-19 thing, which we know almost nothing about. We don't know if it's going to die in certain weathers. We don't know if this is in certain seasons. Blah 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 blah. And then on the other hand, say that we can absolutely project that this is what's going to happen. You can't really do that. It's got to be one or the other. You can't make accurate projections about something you know almost nothing about, and that you have already conflicting data on, and we do. What we do have is the data I showed you, which demonstrates that this thing is a serious thing, but it's not what it's being made out to be. It's the world's not being set on fire, and there's far more people dying. There's people have died, and I know people don't want to hear this. I get it. I understand. This is one of those things that just trigger the emotions. Excuse me, but far more people die of heart disease in a year. A lot more people than have died of coronavirus. Hundreds of thousands by the end of this year will be dead. According to the numbers that we do actually have, hundreds of thousands of people are going to be dead by the end of this year of heart disease. And that's at the top, but coronavirus is like pretty low worldwide when you consider all that stuff. But you can absolutely accurately predict what will happen if we close the economy down, if we just shut the whole thing down. You can definitely predict what's going to happen there because we have history to show us what happens when you do stuff like that. So, that's one severity and imbalance, and you got to walk that fine line where you take it seriously, but you don't flip out and lose your mind over it, and then start accusing people of all kinds of stuff that in any normal situation, you'd probably look at yourself and go, well, why I can't believe I would say something like that to my friend. But there's other things too. Let's not just waste our time talking about coronavirus. There's the crisis in the 5th century at Chalcedon, the Council of Chalcedon. So that was discussing the nature of Christ. And that's where the Hypostatic Union came out of, the doctrine of the Hypostatic Union. You had the one view of Eutyches, which was Monophysitism, or the Monophysite heresy, where it was the idea that the human nature of Christ and the divine nature of Christ are so fused together, they're so mixed together, that what ends up happening is Tertullian gave a really great... turns out Tertullian was already talking about this long before they had the problem at Chalcedon. So that was really interesting to hear. I wonder if I can pull it up here. If you can bear with me here briefly. Cyprian. Defense of orthodoxy. Tertullian made his most positive, lasting the doctrine of theology. Okay, so against so he's arguing with a Sabellian, and Sabellianism is modalism, which was beginning to get prevalent in Tertullian's day. It came to a head in the Council of Nicaea in 325. So Tertullian's arguing against Sabellianism. He says in the do I actually have that? I think he gave the actual quote in here. Oops. La 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 la. Yeah. Okay. Its origin. Well, okay. We say okay. So this is from Tertullian's writings against Praxeas, chapter 27. Tertullian writes, "We must ask how the Word became flesh." John 1:14. Was he transformed into flesh, or did he clothe himself with flesh? Surely it was the second of these. We must believe that God's eternal nature cannot undergo change or transformation. So you can see what Tertullian's concern is. And amidst all of these conflicts, there's always a concern. I don't think we should look at people who have spouted heresy in the past as if they had evil intentions. They had a genuine concern to protect something. In modalism, which we'll talk about here briefly in a second, but Sabellian had a chief concern against Origen's understanding of the Trinity. But we'll get to that. Transformation involves the destruction of what first existed. The thing that is transformed ceases to be what it was and begins to be something else. But God does not cease to be, and he cannot be anything else other than what he is. So you see Tertullian's concern with Praxeas is that his doctrine of the the nature of Christ involves God in a process of change, undergoing the second person of the Trinity. He did, I think, believe, call him the person of the Son, undergoing a change in his nature to acquire the human nature. Tertullian is concerned with that, and it's a legitimate concern. That's where the hypostatic union came out of, I believe, 3 or 4 centuries later. So, and the Word is God, and, quote, the word of the Lord endures forever, Isaiah 40, verse 8. I'm not sure that's a proper application, but anyways, remaining in the same form. His incarnation then means that he comes to exist in flesh and is revealed, seen, and handled through flesh. Other reasons demand this interpretation. For if his incarnation happened through a transformation and change of his substance, Jesus would then be one substance made from two, flesh and spirit, a kind of mixture just as amber as a mixture of silver and gold. In that case, Jesus would end up being neither gold, spirit, nor silver, flesh, because the one element changes the other to produce a new third thing. This view of the incarnation produces a Christ who is neither one thing nor the other, but a third thing which is very different from either. So in a sense, Tertullian addresses the Monophysite heresy, which puts the two natures of Christ too close together. He sort of addresses it centuries earlier. So the example I've used is that if you have water, and you have a kind of Kool-Aid mixture or a tea, let's use a tea because I love tea. I love brewed tea, the way it's supposed to be made. And if you have your tea, your tea bag here and whatever, it's got the tea and stuff, herbs in it, and then you got your water. It's just water and the herbs. But if you mix them together, it becomes something new. It's no longer really water anymore, and the elements of the herbs sort of give way to the tea, and you have a mixture, a fusion. Two things are fused together, and they form something different as a result. That was the concern there. So the Monophysite heresy brings the two natures of Christ too close together, where they just sort of fuse into something else. On the other side, you had the Nestorian heresy, and the Nestorian heresy did the complete opposite. It's an attempt to correct the Monophysite heresy. I believe that's how it went. Tried to separate the two natures, but separating them to a point where you have a sort of schizophrenic Christ, where you have two persons as well as two wills or two beings in the incarnation. And I like the way R.C. Sproul said it. He said that if one of the important distinctions you learn, especially in theology, is the distinction between a distinction and a separation. So, for example, he said, if I distinguish between, so you're made of a body and a soul, right? So you have a soul, and then you also have a body, a physical body. He said, if I distinguish between your body and your soul, I haven't harmed you. But if I separate your body from your soul, I've killed you. I like that example, because that's perfectly illustrates where Nestorius went off the rails on the other end. But so you see how you have two different sides, both vying for the same thing. They're trying to get to the same they have, you could almost say, the same concerns, preserving the integrity and the nature of Christ without going off into weirdness. But they both err on two different sides about the same exact issue. One puts the two natures of Christ way too close for comfort. The other separates them far too much for comfort. What the church had to do is walk a fine line, and that's where the Chalcedonian Creed came from, which is that he's truly God and he's truly man. I know a lot of people say 100% God, he's fully God and fully man. That's actually technically a contradiction. It's not exactly what it was meant to be. It's truly God, truly man. Jesus was truly a man, but he was also truly God. They're neither fused together nor are they separated entirely. But that's what the hypostatic union, and I believe the term means that this is a mystery. We don't truly understand what this is, but we can see from Scripture that the descriptions that Scripture gives us is that Jesus was a real man, He did all the things that we do, except sin. But he was truly a man. But he is also truly God, come in the flesh, in a way we can't truly understand. And that's one of the things that we have to understand when it comes to theology is we have to be careful that we're not using our limited, finite brains to come up with things, that we start with Scripture and work our way to our categories from that. Because that's what you could say, that's where the Sabellian heresy came from. So the Sabellian heresy, also dealing with the Godhead, you could say. Sabellius arises in, I think in the 3rd century. Yes, 3rd century. Sabellius rises in the 3rd century. And his chief concern, I believe he was arguing against Origen. He was uncomfortable with how Origen sort of differentiated between the Son and the Father. And this is one of those strange moments where Origen was pretty orthodox. But so Sabellius began to argue against that and basically said that the preeminence is really the Father. The Father is the true God, and the Son and the Spirit are forms of the Father. They're modes of the Father. The Father sort of goes into the mode of the Son when he needs to, and goes into the mode of the Spirit when he needs to. So, again, let's think about this. What is the concern here? The concern here for Sabellius is preserving the oneness of God. That's his concern. And I think it's a very genuine concern, obviously. And especially when you're in an age where we haven't truly developed the Catholic doctrine of the Trinity at this point. So obviously you're treading on unknown territory in this area, so it can be difficult to navigate. But so he's concerned with the oneness of God. And in his concern with the oneness of God, emphasizes far too much his oneness and ends up with a Unitarian doctrine that turns the Son and the Spirit into meaningless modes. It's just sort of pointless, of no real substance at all. They're just kind of different versions of the Father. And that's a result of our human limitations, trying to make sense of things, not letting Scripture define our categories for us. So you can see how that is his concern. And I believe that there were other people. No, there wasn't. I take that back. I know that there was absolute unanimity on the idea that there's only one God, monotheism. That was absolutely certain in the church. But again, concerns were that for the church, when they were talking about the Sabellian crisis, they came to a head in 267, I believe. I believe it's 267. So their concern was that we're not really comfortable with the Sabellian thing, and it ends up in a kind of pantheism sort of thing. But at the same time, we still have to struggle with this here because we do have three separations of some sort, some kind of separation going on with the three persons. So we don't want to fall to the side where we put them far too much together, and the three persons are swallowed up in the oneness, so that the one God's ultimately a Unitarian God, but he just kind of plays around with three different masks. Which would ultimately be pointless. Why would God need to do that? So there's that. But then they're struggling with the other idea is that if we do separate them from the Sabellian issue, we risk tritheism, three gods. We don't want to go there either. So you see the tension, the struggle here. You got two different sides here, and the potential for serious heresy. You don't want to go too far off on this side, but you don't want to overcorrect and then end up way too far from the other side. A balance needs to be found between them, where you don't remove this for the sake of this, you don't take out this for the sake of that. So that's where ultimately the doctrine of the Trinity came in. So you have one being. God is God is one in one sense, in one particular sense, but he's three in a different sense. One being in the sense of the essence of the persons. They all carry the essence of being, just like Tertullian's example. All of gold, you can have gold this and gold that. Gold spoon. That's just an example. You can have a gold spoon. You can have a golden fork, a golden, something. Now they all share the same essence. They're all made of gold, but they're still distinct from one another. But if you fuse them together, obviously you wouldn't have those three. But so that's what the church is working with. The three have they share the same essence of eternality, creation. I mean they're the creator. They are the creator God. Eternality, omniscience, omnipotence, immutability, that kind of stuff. All the divine attributes are given to the three persons. They all share that oneness. At the same time, you still have three distinct persons who are distinguished by their persons, not by their being. And that's where you have the doctrine of the Trinity. And that's where, honestly, you find the ultimate balance in all of life. When you look at my logo that I have, you'll notice in the background, kind of like behind in the F and the B, they're kind of sort of put together there. My cool little way I did that. You'll notice in the background I have. Let me show you here. You see this. You see the Trinity, the symbol of the Trinity back there. That's not there just to remind you that I'm a Trinitarian. That's there for a reason, because in the Trinity you find true, absolute, the apex of all balance in all the universe. The Trinity solves the great philosophical problem of man, of the one and the many. That has been the issue that has plagued mankind in all of his existence. Most people aren't aware of that problem because don't do much in terms of studying history. But the early philosophers were struggling with the idea of the one and the many. You see John tackle that, what they struggle with, and John answers them in his gospel in the first chapter with the Logos. But the struggle was with the one and the many. So you can look at the one and the many problem in society today. If you have, it kind of almost relates to our situation today, but what's happening right now. If you have a society that functions on the oneness, you could say the unity of the society. Again, from the outset, that sounds good if that's just your working principle, the unity. But when you start including the fact that you still have a manyness, a lot of people who are all individuals, then you start running into a problem. So then you have to start asking the question, at what point does the oneness have authority over the many, and then the many over the oneness? So here's your tension right here. If you put too much emphasis on the one, then the many gets swallowed up in it. It just gobbles them all up. And you have totalitarianism, the unique individuality of the many is destroyed. And contrary to what people have said to me about that I'm in idolatry over individual sovereignty, the Bible promotes the dignity and preservation of human life. And I'll get to that maybe in a second. I don't want to go too far off on that, but so I do believe absolutely it's biblical to believe in the individual rights and dignity of every single human being. I believe that's biblical. So you don't want the one to swallow the many and just destroy their dignity altogether. But at the same time, if you turn that right around and you emphasize the many who swallow up the one, you end up with chaos, because the many will now rule in a world of ultra pluralism. And the idea of pluralism sounds good until you find yourself walking on a narrow bridge and you're coming this way and another guy's coming this way. Someone's going to have to get out of the way. And when you're both functioning on pluralism, which is that, I'm my own man and, I do my own thing, and he's saying the same thing, and you're basically saying, I don't have to get out of the way. He's going to have to get out of the way. Something's got to give. When the immovable object meets the irresistible force, something's got to give. So if you take out the oneness that unifies the people, then the people have no foundational structure by which that holds them all together, and you have chaos. So then you'll have anarchy, chaos, and just destruction. You'll have no structure in society. But then again, once you start recognizing that and you realize, oh, so we're going to have structure, we're going to have some kind of governmental function, you're immediately then, if you're thinking, you're going to be pulled to back over this side and begin to realize, But if I go too far over here, then I'm going to end up in totalitarianism. So we can't go there. What do we have to do? We got to find the proper balance. And I don't know if the founding fathers intended to do this with the formation of this United States, but I think they whether they intended to do it or not, they created a system that, under the Trinity obviously, was the ultimate societal example of the one and the many. It was the federal government of the United States. You had the idea of a federal government that resided over the United States, but it didn't control them. It is not what its intention. Its intention wasn't to control them and rule over the states. The states were supposed to have their own, and they still do in a certain sense, but not as much as before. Federal government is slowly taking over. You notice we're slowly being swallowed up in the one, right? And we're slowly becoming a totalitarian state. But it was originally that the federal government resided over, its job was to protect the states and to keep them unified. But allow the states to be their own entities with their own individual, unique, and distinct laws for those states. You had a beautiful balance of the one and the many. In society itself, how do you build a society that honors and recognizes the one, the unity, that honors and recognizes that you have to have some kind of authoritative structure that keeps the society together, but at the same time recognizes the individuality and the rights of man? How do you build a society that does that? The best way to do that, obviously, is to recognize you have to solve the problem of the one and the many. And when you see that the Christian worldview offers the solution to the problem of the one and the many, that should give you your model. And what do? You realize that you and me, just like I was talking about with the persons of the Trinity, we're one in one sense. You know how we're one? We're one in our humanity. We share human nature. That means, and in its fullest sense, to share in the same nature, we are created. And when you recognize that we're created, you realize that my humanity, my dignity doesn't come from me. Again, what's the Constitution say? That these are rights that come from God. If the rights come from you and me, if my dignity is defined by the fact that I can cognitively conceive of what dignity means, and then therefore label myself dignified, why can't I do that to others and then therefore remove their dignity? And you might say, well, you can't do that. You can consign dignity to yourself, but you can't consign dignity to others. Well, who says? If there's no creator who defines who and what we are, who are you to tell me what I get to dignify and whatnot? You don't get to tell me what to do. But of course, that's not true. The fact of the matter is there is an overarching law that we are all aware of that pricks at our conscience. And the only thing that makes sense of that is when we recognize that we don't derive our dignity from ourselves. We derive our dignity from something else, which means we were created. We belong to somebody who created us, the God who created us in his own image. So, knowing that my dignity comes from God, and your dignity comes from God, and who and what I am comes from God, we are united in that sense. But at the same time, we're still different. You are your own person. I'm my own person. My sister's her own person. My mom's her own person. My dad's his own person, and so on and so forth and so forth. You have your own individual likes and stuff like that. I have my own individual likes. Your own individual gifts. I have my individual gifts, and all these kinds of things like that. And that entire plurality of humanity, the whole thing, is unified in one particular way. In one way that is not overemphasized to the point where we're all just kind of glued together, where we just get all swallowed up in one thing. But that we are a plurality of unity. And if you recognize that structure, you can build a society successfully on that method, where because my rights come from God, I don't have a right to violate my neighbor's rights, and my neighbor doesn't have a right to violate my rights. My neighbor is obligated to live under the law of God, just as I am. And When we're doing those kinds of things, we are loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. When we reject the unity that brings us together, you have chaos. When we reject the plurality that separates us, you have totalitarianism. So you see the balance. The balance has to be walked. That fine line has to be walked to walk that narrow bridge that Jesus was talking about. And again, I'm making application here, just making sure we're all aware of that. But you can go on and find examples after example after example of these kinds of things. If I were to sit here and try to think about a bunch of them, we'd be here for a while. But I think I've gone over an hour, and I think I've gone over my time here. So I hope that this is going to be useful and helpful to you guys. Again, I would just ask that we really think very clearly and trying to find a balance. That's what this whole program is about. I want to try and find the balance between things, how we can find the solution in every instance of the one and the many. That's what this is all about. Thank you for joining me and finding the balance. Soli Deo Gloria. God bless. Talk to you guys later. Bye.